and welcome to Thursday Night Live. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show tonight. So we all have psychic abilities, but the way that is presented to many people leaves them a bit confused about what that is, what that means, and how they can recognize it in their own life. So today's topic I'm calling, What's My Channel? Because when you're talking about a psychic ability, you're actually talking about different ways in which we receive information. And it's different from all of us. And one's not better than another versus the other. But I'm going to explain what the experience is so that you can reflect on yourself in your life. And I'm hoping in the chat room, you'll give feedback as to what you think your channel is. And so that you can start tapping into that information to use it to guide you through your life. And so there are four primary channels in which we bring through information. There's clairsentience, clairaudience, clairvoyance, and clairconsciousness. So I'm going to start with brain fart. Clairsentience. So clairsentience is tied to the second chakra. It's our ability to feel energy from the world around us. And so when we go into an environment and we feel the vibes in the room, or we walk up to somebody and they just give us a bad feeling, or maybe they give us a good feeling, or there's some tension going on and we can feel that discord in our bodies, it's because we're having a clairsentient experience. In this day and age, many times clairsentience is tied to being an empath, and people that are empathic often utilize that ability of clairsentience. And so to me, those two terms could be used interchangeably. So if you're a feeler, or that's the primary way that you bring information in, notice that, own it, observe it. And so when you go somewhere and it doesn't feel right to you, and that's the key word, it doesn't feel good, or it feels great, listen to that, honor that, and trust and validate that that is the information that you're getting and not just your imagination. Clairaudience is tied to the fifth chakra, or our ability to communicate both verbally and non-verbally. And so people that are clairaudient tend to hear things in their head. So there's our inner voice that, might be talking to us from our inner critic, complaining and whining on the inside. And then there's that soft voice inside that gives you tidbits of information. So if it's the egoic voice, it will sit there in long streams and paragraphs, download all kinds of stuff. But when it's our clairaudience and it's spirit communicating to us, it's usually in a soft whisper. Many times we don't listen to it unless we have gotten to the point where we start paying attention. So as an example, and this is one of my favorite, I'm not particularly the most clairaudient people. Like, that is not one of my primary channels, although in more recent years, it has really escalated into the forefront. And now I have learned to, I don't want to say trust, but at least listen to it, listen and validate. So for example, I was doing a medical intuitive session with a client who had a kidney issue. And so I'm like, I wonder what would be a good supplement for you. And I got the word hydrangea, and that's what it was, hydrangea. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I have hydrangeas growing in my backyard, but what? It seemed extremely random at the time. However, I had taken up the position of listen, but validate. And I looked up hydrangea for kidney dysfunction, and bam, it was a thing. It was actually, the properties tied to it really fit with what this person was going through on a physical level. So I was like, hydrangea for you. Um, and so now if I get these random things, especially in a session, I just will communicate them, because after a while, especially with the hearing one, after a while, you can start to tell the difference between your inner voice and the voice of spirit communicating with you. And that just takes time, and it takes practice, and it takes listening to it and validating that that is what you're hearing. Clairvoyance is tied to the sixth chakra. It's our ability to see mental images in our mind's eye. And so to recognize whether, because there are some people that are just not clairvoyant, they're not able to visualize particularly. But if you're a visual person, you would be able to see your car and where it is parked in and around your house in your mind's eye. You would be able to see the face of your mom or your dad or your husband or your wife or your kids or your dog in your mind's eye. And that's how that information comes through. And so, as an example, and I think I shared this story on the show, my dishwasher was backing up, and I tried to call the plumber because it was bad. So I called the plumber, actually it wasn't the plumber, it was the utility, it was the dishwasher repair guy. But it was really close to Christmas, and he couldn't come, and I live in Podunk nowhere, so finding someone to come work is a little challenging at best. But there was a bunch of water sitting in the bottom of the dishwasher that I knew needed to go. Like, my feeling was it needed to go or it was going to stink. So there's me, and I'm sitting on the floor with a bucket and a coffee cup, and I'm trying to scoop the water out, which was not being particularly successful. So I asked myself, well, what would be better? And the first thing that appeared in my mind's eye was a turkey baster. Now, how freaking random is that? But that's what I got. So I went and I got the turkey baster, and I got the whole thing emptied out in about 20 minutes. Win-win on my part. So that's clairvoyance, and so sometimes people have a hard time, again, separating out, is this my imagination or is this real information? And it really is about, and we've talked about this, paying attention to the information that comes in, and then either listening to it and following it, or not listening to it and following it, and then down the road, later that day or the next day or whatever, coming to the realization that you should have listened to that information. And that's really how you tune up these different abilities. The last one is clairconsciousness, and it's a little bit hard to describe. And I can only explain it mostly through an example. But clairconsciousness is the ability to receive information on a seventh chakra level. So it comes in, but it really avoids a lot of your filters. And you just know things off the top of your head. That's the classic line. You know things off the top of your head. Now, I personally have come to the realization that my clairconsciousness is directly attached to my mouth. And so there are times where there's something going on and I will just make a comment. However, those comments are true. Millions of years ago, before I was Rita the Psychic Chick or Dr. Rita, I was working at a job, and the lab manager, I was young, the lab manager didn't come into work one day, which was abnormal, very abnormal. The next day, I walked up to him, crossed my arms, looked him in the face and said, well, where were you yesterday? Having them checked for a brain tumor? And his face turned white, and he walked out of the room for me to find out that was where he was the day before, having them checked for a brain tumor. Oops. So if you have that kind of experience, if you just make a comment and it turns out to be not only kind of true, but like on point, right there true, it's your clairconsciousness. So there's how we receive information in the general sense, but then there's also how individuals are able to process certain kinds of information easier than other kinds of information. So, for example, I work as a medical intuitive. And so it is very easy for me to look at and access information about a person's health, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, on intuitive levels. It just comes to me. It's very easy. There's not, it just is. And it took me a long time to realize that all psychics weren't built the same, and not all psychics are able to access that information with that level of ease. On the other hand, there are people that work as animal communicators where they will have like psychic conversations with your pet. And I've done some animal communication more on a very health level for people and like their dogs and maybe their cats, but I don't put any guarantee next to it because it's just really not my thing. Where there are other people, they'll have like these in-depth conversations and give you all this depth and breadth and detail about what's going on with your pet. And so that's just like a different channel, a different way that they vibrate and bring that information in. Some people are mediums and they talk to dead people. I choose not to talk to dead people. I think if I wanted to talk to dead people, they'd be hanging all around my house, and I choose to not have them hang around my house. And so I have intentionally chosen not to practice and not to open up that conduit of dead people energy in my house. If it's your house, it's a totally different thing. In my house, ain't happening. Some people are really good at looking at relationship dynamics. Before I started doing the health related work, I just wanted to be Rita the psychic chick and talk to you about your relationship space. I really enjoy that. Because for me, I can look at dynamics between people and how things are interplaying and which is bigger and smaller. And it's kind of similar doing the medical intuitive work. There's a healthy heart and a not healthy heart. There's a healthy heart and there's your heart. And either they are matching or they're not. And so I can look, compare and contrast what's going on. Same thing, there are some people that are just very good at looking at business related stuff. So there's any topic that you can throw out there and people can be more specialized. I think working as a medium or working as an animal communicator kind of put you in a slightly different category than your traditional psychics, where talking about relationships, talking about health, that's kind of specialized. Talking about business is just, part of life and a bit more common. So I thought, all right, let me look. Oh, all right. So for me, and I've never really talked about this before on air, and I just want to I have two more points, throw in, so when I'm doing a reading for somebody, whether it's here on Thursday Night Live with Dr. Rita Louise or in a private consultation, there's two different things that are going on. So when I'm doing sessions here on air, I'm pulling a card because to me, having a question is the gateway, having a keyword, as if you're looking things up online, you put your thing into the search engine, your keyword or your query into the search engine, it brings up results. And so because of the format of this show, I use the cards to help me create that keyword, create that question, to look at your energy, compare and contrast, and see what's going on or what's jumping out at me. And it changes from person to person. And I can take the same card and read 2 or 3 people and come up with completely different responses based on their energy dynamic. When I'm working with a client privately, however, I like to know what's going on. I like to know what's the question, where are we trying to go, and then I will backtrack that and start breaking it down into its key components. And so sometimes the information comes through very visually. Sometimes it comes through from a feeling, like that just feels bad to me. Sometimes I get those weird messages, the weird messages. And then sometimes I'm just talking, and whatever I'm going to say, and usually that comes out really blunt. Oops. But it is what it is. I really can't control spirit. But one thing that I did not mention in my list of channels, and which is what brought up this whole concept in the first place, is the concept of predicting the future. And this was all started because a woman, like Develop Your Psychic Abilities on Facebook or something like that, put up a thing that says, what do you think it is going to be going on next month? I don't know, but it was something about the future, and she suggested to people to take notes and write things down and see how close you get. But predicting the future, to me, okay, and this is just through my belief system, is a very precarious thing. Now, there are some people that can predict the future, but I feel like that information comes through in spurts. It comes through via special circumstances, and it's not like, oh, I woke up and every day and every moment of my day I'm predicting the future. I mean, it's more complicated than that. Where having a feeling can change 500 times a day, where predicting the future is not, it's not that way. Now, when people ask questions that are kind of predict the future, you can look at the possibilities, because people do hold energy in their space of, this is where I'm going and this is what I'm bringing to the table. And so you can comment on those things. Like, I want to start a business. What do you see about it? And so if the person is business minded, if it looks like they've got their act together, if it looks like they have the inner motivation to create this entity, their business, then I will comment in a more positive and affirmative way. But it's not that it's going to happen, but they are bringing the necessary elements with them to make that happen. But there's not anything to say that the next day you might be, going down the street and you get hit by a bus. I mean, when you sit there and look at predicting the future, there are so many variables that get thrown into the mix that it's very challenging, if not impossible. So my little piece of caution is, if you are looking to get a reading and the person claims that they can predict the future, I would maybe steer clear, because, and I think it's interesting because they say that, and then, they tell you, oh, this is going to happen and that's going to happen and that's going to happen as part of their session. And then they don't. And it puts a negative shine on anybody that does intuitive work. And so, I don't know, that's my 2 cents on it. So my question to you, and I hope you'll provide some feedback in the chat room, is what channel do you operate on? Okay. All right. And as always, if you are in the need of getting intuitive guidance, please visit my webpage, soulhealer.com. That's soulhealer.com. Reach out to me and set up a time for a private consultation. This show is brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. And you can go there and download. Why does it do that? It always does the wrong one. There it is. My free 50-page guide, Jumpstart Your Intuition, and it's loaded with exercises so you can actually start to tap into these channels, primarily your clairvoyance. The training program really is about developing your third eye muscle. So if you are a very visual person, working on clairvoyant levels will come very easy and naturally to you. Again, AppliedEnergeticsInstitute.com. If you are listening to the show in a rerun format, if you are listening to it on Spotify or iTunes or iHeartRadio or any of those, and you want to join the fun and get a free on-air psychic reading from me, the best way to do that is go to my YouTube channel. That's Just Energy Radio on YouTube. 3 words, Just Energy Radio on YouTube. Hit the live link at 7 o'clock Central on Thursdays, and you will be able to join the fun. And as always, please do go visit my different social media channels and connect with me. Like, subscribe, sign up for everything I have is free. With my Substack account, I have moved my mailing list to Substack. And so if you just follow me on, no, I think you would need to subscribe. If you subscribe to me on Substack, again, always free, you'll get reminders of things that are coming up in the Dr. Rita world, which is sweet. No, go back on. There I am. Okay. Okay, guys, are you ready to rock and roll? Let's get the party started. God, there's 37 comments.